I wasn't supposed to hear it. I was sitting at my desk, staring at the open spreadsheets on my laptop when my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. Dad, a name that once carried warmth, but lately felt like an obligation. I answered, "Hey, Dad." No response. At first, I thought it was a bad connection, but then I heard rustling, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor, a sigh, and then his voice. "She's a failure. She'll never succeed." My stomach twisted. I froze, the phone still pressed against my ear. "Come on, Greg." My mother's voice chimed in, quieter, but just as cutting. "She's doing fine. She pays the mortgage, doesn't she?" My father scoffed. "That's the least she can do after everything we've done for her. You think I'm proud of her? She was a mistake that should have never happened. A constant disappointment. And she thinks she's successful? She'll never be anything more than a joke. A mistake. A joke." The words sliced through me like 1,000 paper cuts. My mouth went dry, my fingers tightening around my phone. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. "She's lucky we even let her be part of this family," my father continued. "I don't know why she bothers trying so hard. She'll never be one of us." I realized then he had never meant to call me. He had forgotten to hang up. That's when the call ended. The silence in my apartment was deafening. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would shake the walls. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. For the past 6 years, I had been quietly paying their mortgage. They thought their payments were going to the bank, but the truth was, I was the one keeping a roof over their heads. Through JSC Holdings, the investment company I'd created with the help of my financial advisor, I had bought their mortgage from the bank after they nearly lost the house. They never read the fine print. They never knew. They had no idea they had been living under my generosity. And now I realized they never would have cared. My whole life I had bent over backwards trying to earn my father's approval. I worked harder than anyone else, climbed higher in my career, made more money than he ever did. But it was never enough. It would never be enough. But this was the moment that changed everything. I exhaled slowly, my hands steady as I reached for my laptop. I opened the folder containing the mortgage agreements, the payment schedule, the ownership documents. My father thought I was a failure, that I was nothing. But he was about to learn exactly who he had been depending on all these years. And in 1 week, he was going to get the ultimate surprise. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my father's words looping in my mind like a broken record. She was a mistake that should have never happened. It wasn't just the insult. It was the certainty in his voice. The way he said it like it was a fact, not an opinion. As if my entire existence was an inconvenience. I should have been used to it. My father had never been one to offer praise. Even as a kid, I had to fight for his approval. Straight A's? Not good enough. Promotions? Expected. Buying my first home? Waste of money. Everything I did was either dismissed or criticized. But through it all, I held on to one fragile hope. Maybe if I worked hard enough, I could change his mind. That hope shattered the moment I heard that call. By sunrise, I was done feeling hurt. I was done feeling anything. I pulled myself out of bed, made a cup of black coffee, and sat down at my desk. The glow of my laptop screen reflected in my tired eyes as I opened the folder labeled JSC Holdings, property number 12, my parents' house. The mortgage they thought they were paying was actually in my name. The bank had transferred it to JSC Holdings years ago when they were months away from foreclosure. Back then, my mother had called me in tears, begging me to help. My father had refused to ask, too proud to admit defeat, but I stepped in anyway. I had set up the perfect arrangement. They thought they were making payments to the bank, but in reality, every check they sent was going straight to my LLC. Of course, I was covering the majority of the cost. 6 years. 6 years of paying thousands every month so they could live comfortably, never once asking for a thank you. never once expecting them to grovel. But I had expected basic decency. I clicked through the documents, my hands steady as I reviewed the fine print. When I first set up the mortgage buyout, my financial advisor, Mark, had insisted on including a purchase option clause, a legal safeguard in case things ever went south. Back then, I had laughed. What could possibly go wrong? Now, I wasn't laughing. If they missed a payment, JSC Holdings had the right to seize full ownership of the house immediately. My parents would be downgraded to month-to-month tenants, and if they failed to pay rent, I could evict them under state law. They had no idea how much power I actually had. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of it settle over me. My father thought I was a failure. He thought I would never amount to anything. But he had been living under my roof this entire time. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. I had the power to take everything from them. The only question was, did they deserve it? As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Mom. Hey, sweetheart, can you come over for dinner this Sunday? We'd love to see you. I stared at the message. The last time she invited me for dinner, it had been for one reason: money. I debated ignoring it, but something in my gut told me to play along. If my father could pretend to love me, I could pretend right back. So I typed, me. Of course, looking forward to it. A lie, but necessary. Before closing my laptop, I had one last thing to check. My uncle, my dad's older brother, had always been on my side. He was the only one in the family who had ever treated me like I mattered. I texted him. Me. Hey, Uncle Ray. I need to ask you something. Have you ever heard Dad say anything about me? Anything unusual? His reply came almost instantly. Uncle Ray. Jessica, we need to talk. I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but it's worse than you think. My chest tightened. Worse? What else had they been saying? The phone rang and I answered on the first ring. Uncle Ray? He sighed. Jessica, I've kept quiet for too long, but after what I heard last week, I can't anymore. I braced myself. What did they say? There was a pause, then, they don't just talk about you behind your back. They've been planning something. Your father? He's been looking into your finances. He's convinced you've been hiding money from them. He told your mom last week that if you don't willingly hand over more cash, they'll find a way to force your hand. Blood roared in my ears. Force my hand? How? He mentioned calling your employer, trying to discredit you, maybe even contacting the IRS to audit you. A cold, sharp anger settled in my gut. They weren't just ungrateful. They weren't just cruel. They were willing to destroy me for money. I took a slow breath, my fingers curling into fists. Uncle Ray, I need you to do something for me. Anything, sweetheart. I need proof. I didn't know what my parents had planned, but one thing was certain. They thought I was weak. They had no idea who they were dealing with. And in just a few days, they were going to learn exactly how wrong they were. I spent the next 2 days preparing. If my father wanted to play dirty, I'd show him just how dangerous underestimating me could be. First, I called Mark, my financial advisor. Jessica? He greeted, his voice warm. I take it this isn't just a social call? Not exactly, I said, tapping my pen against my desk. I need to know exactly how airtight our agreement is on property number 12. If they miss a payment, how fast can I act? Mark didn't even hesitate. Immediately. The purchase option clause allows JSC Holdings to assume full ownership the second they default. They'd have no legal recourse, unless they have $350,000 lying around to buy you out. I smirked. They don't. Then they're screwed. I exhaled slowly, feeling a sense of control settle over me. Good, I said. I need you to do one more thing. Watch their account. I have a feeling they're already struggling, and I need confirmation that their next payment will bounce. Mark chuckled. That won't take long. From what I see, their balance is dangerously low. If they don't magically find $5,800 by the 15th, they're toast. I glanced at the calendar. That was in 4 days. 4 days until my father, the man who called me a failure, would wake up to realize he had been living on my generosity. 4 days until he would have to beg me for help. I wasn't going to give it. On Sunday, I drove to my parents' house as if nothing had happened. The sight of their home, the home I owned, filled me with an odd sense of detachment. This place had once been my safe haven. Now, it was enemy territory. As I walked up the driveway, my mother flung the door open, her face beaming. "Jessica, sweetheart, come in." Her enthusiasm was fake. I knew it now. I stepped inside, the scent of garlic and roasted chicken filling the air. My father sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. My mother hovered beside him, placing dishes carefully as if the perfect dinner would soften whatever they were about to ask of me. My brother Liam leaned back in his chair, smirking. Unlike me, Liam had never struggled for our father's approval. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Despite the fact that he had 0 accomplishments to his name, I took my seat, my face a mask of neutrality. "Jessica," my father finally spoke, his voice thick with forced warmth. "It's good to see you." I nodded. "You too, Dad." There was an awkward silence before my mother jumped in, her voice syrupy sweet. "We've been thinking a lot about family lately," she said, reaching for my hand across the table, "and how important it is to support one another in difficult times." I didn't react. That's true. My father exhaled as if this was hard for him, as if he were the one making the sacrifice. "The truth is, Jessica, we need your help. The mortgage payment this month is a little tight." A little tight. They were about to default, and he was still downplaying it. "How much do you need?" I asked, feigning ignorance. My mother hesitated. "We were thinking, just an extra $3,000 a month. That should keep us stable." I nearly laughed. They had no idea I was already paying $5,800 every single month. And they wanted me to throw in another $3,000 on top of it? I set my fork down, tilting my head. "That's a lot of money." "It's nothing compared to what we've done for you," my father snapped, irritation breaking through his act. "We raised you, gave you everything. The least you can do is support your family." I held his gaze, my blood turning ice cold. The least I could do? These were the same people who had mocked me behind my back. The same father who had called me a failure while living under my roof. I took a slow sip of water, controlling my expression. "I'll think about it." My mother exhaled in relief. "Oh, sweetheart, thank you. We knew we could count on you." I forced a smile. They had no idea that in 3 days they'd lose everything. That night, I got a call from Mark. They defaulted. The words sent a shiver of satisfaction through me. "They what?" I asked, playing dumb. "They didn't make the mortgage payment," Mark repeated. "The funds weren't there. As of midnight tonight, JSC Holdings officially owns the house outright." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. It was done. My father, the man who had looked down on me my entire life, was now my tenant. "Do you want to start the eviction process?" Mark asked. "Not yet. I wanted to see how long it would take for them to realize the truth." I smiled, glancing at the framed family photo on my desk. It was from years ago, back when I still believed my father was capable of love. "Not yet," I murmured. "Let's see how far they're willing to go before they break." Because they would break, and this time I wouldn't be there to catch them. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days passed, and the silence from my parents was deafening. No calls, no texts, no guilt-tripping messages about family sticking together. Nothing. I knew why. They hadn't realized it yet. They still thought their payment had gone through, still believed they had everything under control. They had no idea the house they lived in, the one they called their home, was no longer theirs. At exactly 9:07 a.m. on Friday morning, the notification arrived in my inbox. Subject, urgent. Default notice, property number 12 from JSC Holdings, legal department. I opened the email, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and satisfaction. The legal notice was cold, formal, and undeniable. Due to failure to submit the agreed-upon mortgage payment by the deadline of the 15th, the purchase option clause has been exercised. Effective immediately, JSC Holdings is the sole owner of the property located at 2nd Street. As per contractual agreements, the current occupants will be considered month-to-month tenants, subject to rental agreements moving forward. Failure to adhere to rental terms may result in eviction proceedings. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. This was it. I had all the power now. I didn't have to call them first. They came to me. At 9:42 a.m., my phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. At 9:47 a.m., she called again. At 9:50 a.m., it was my father. I let them sweat for a full hour before I finally answered. Jessica. My mother's voice was high-pitched, frantic. There's been some kind of mistake with the bank. We just got a notice saying we've defaulted on the mortgage. But that can't be right. You have to help us. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile creeping across my face. It's not a mistake. Silence. What? My mother's voice was barely a whisper. I said it's not a mistake, I repeated, enunciating every word. You didn't pay your mortgage. So the house? It's not yours anymore. A stunned pause, then, Jessica, sweetheart, what are you talking about? My mother let out a nervous chuckle, as if this was all a joke. This is our house. I tilted my head. No, Mom, it was your house. But the second you defaulted, JSC Holdings took full ownership. Legally, you're now tenants. The weight of my words finally landed. No, that's impossible. My father's voice cut in, his usual authority cracking with panic. The mortgage is with the bank. We've been paying it for years. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Then I dropped the final bombshell. You weren't paying the bank, Dad. You were paying me. Dead. Silence. Then, you're lying. My father's voice was low, sharp, but I could hear the fear beneath it. I sighed. No, I'm not. 6 years ago, when you almost lost this house, I bought the mortgage. You've been sending your payments to JSC Holdings every month thinking it was a bank. But it's my company. I paused for effect. I own this house. I always have. My mother's breath hitched. My father cursed under his breath. And then, my brother Liam, who had apparently been listening in, laughed. You mean to tell me we've been paying rent to our own failure of a sister this whole time? He scoffed. Well, I guess that explains why the bank's such a mess. You probably screwed up the paperwork just like you screw up everything else. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. Liam had always been like this. Arrogant, cruel, entitled. Well, since you seem to think I screw everything up, I said smoothly, you're going to love this part. Rent is due in 30 days. And if you can't pay, you're getting evicted. Jessica, wait. My mother started, but my father cut her off. This is a bluff, he snapped. You wouldn't do this to your own family. I let out a short laugh. Wouldn't I? I thought about the years I had spent covering for them, the thousands upon thousands of dollars I had spent keeping them comfortable while they belittled me behind my back. I thought about my father's voice on that phone call. She's a mistake that should have never happened. I thought about how they had planned to blackmail me, ruin my career, steal from me if I didn't willingly hand over more money. My father had always believed I was weak. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. I've already spoken to my lawyer, I said calmly. If you don't pay, you're out. And if you try anything, any manipulation, any threats, any accidental damage to the house, I'll press charges. You ungrateful little... I hung up before my father could finish the sentence. Within minutes, my phone exploded with messages. Mom, Jessica, please don't do this. We're family. Let's talk. Dad, you'll regret this. Mark my words. Liam, you think you're so smart? You're just a bitter, pathetic loser. We'll find a way to take the house back. Watch. I read each one, then blocked their numbers. I had spent my whole life bending over backward for them. Now I was done. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window, letting the weight of everything settle over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't holding them up anymore. They were finally going to have to stand on their own. And if they fell, that was their problem, not mine. The days that followed were eerily quiet. No calls, no messages, no desperate pleas. I half expected my mother to show up at my door, crying and begging for forgiveness. I expected my father to rage, to try and intimidate me into reversing my decision. I expected my brother to scheme, to find some loophole that would let them keep the house. But none of that happened. Instead, they went silent. I knew why. They weren't accepting their fate. They were planning their next move. The desperate attempt. It came 3 days later, on a Wednesday morning. I was at work when my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. I ignored it. A minute later, another call came in. And then, an email. Subject: urgent, home foreclosure mistake from law offices. I clicked it open. Dear Ms. Carter, we have been contacted by your parents, Greg and Linda Carter, regarding the recent foreclosure of their home. They believe there has been a misunderstanding and would like to discuss the possibility of reinstating ownership. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to avoid further legal complications. Sincerely, John R. Hastings, Esquire. I closed the email with a smirk. They had hired a lawyer. Of course they had. I forwarded the email to Mark, my financial advisor. Less than 10 minutes later, he called me back laughing. They don't have a case, he said. They signed the mortgage contract. They signed the purchase option clause. They signed everything. They can't fight this in court because legally, you're in the right. I exhaled, relieved but not surprised. I figured, but they won't stop, will they? Mark chuckled. Probably not. But there's nothing they can do. I thought about my father. His pride, his arrogance. The way he would rather destroy me than admit he had failed. Number they wouldn't stop. They'd keep pushing until they had nothing left to hold on to. That night, as I was finishing up dinner, my phone rang. Uncle Ray, I picked up. Hey, Uncle Ray? I just got off the phone with your father, he said without greeting me. His tone was serious. You need to be careful. I frowned. What now? He's not just trying to fight this legally. Ray sighed. He's looking for other ways to make you cave. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? He's calling your job, trying to get you fired. My stomach dropped. Are you serious? He told me, word for word, that if you won't give them back the house willingly, he'll ruin you another way. He said something about contacting HR, making up a complaint, trying to frame you for fraud. Anything that could get you out of the picture. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. Of course he would. When faced with his own failures, my father would rather burn everything to the ground than admit defeat. But he wasn't just going after the house anymore. He was going after me. I wasn't about to wait for him to make his move. The next morning, I walked into HR myself. Jessica? My manager, Lauren, greeted me warmly. What's up? I forced a small smile. I need to talk to you about something important. In private. She led me into her office, shutting the door behind her. I took a deep breath. I need to give you a heads up about something. My father, he's going to try and get me fired. Lauren's brows furrowed. What? I explained everything. The mortgage, the default, the threats. The moment I finished, she let out a long breath and shook her head. Jessica, let me be clear. You are not going anywhere. Relief flooded through me. We deal with stuff like this more often than you'd think, she continued. People with grudges, family drama, false reports. If your father calls, we'll document everything, but I promise you, he doesn't have the power to touch your job. She gave me a reassuring smile. I'll notify our legal team just in case. If he steps 1 foot out of line, we'll hit him with a cease and desist. I exhaled, tension I hadn't realized I was carrying leaving my body. My father had lost his house. And now, he had lost his power over me too. That night, it happened. A knock at my door. A hard, urgent knock. I knew before I even opened it. I swung the door open, and there they were. My parents. My father stood stiff, his face red with anger. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying. "Jessica," she whispered. "Please." I folded my arms. "What do you want?" "We need the house back," my father said, his voice low, threatening. "You have no right to do this to us." I tilted my head, unimpressed. "I have every right. Legally, financially, morally." My mother clasped her hands together, desperate. "We raised you. We gave you everything. You're punishing us for what?" I cut in sharply. "For calling me a failure? For saying I was a mistake? For trying to ruin my life the moment I stopped giving you money?" She flinched. My father's jaw clenched. "You're being cruel." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "No, Dad," I said, voice steady. "I'm being fair." A thick silence settled between us. Then my father's eyes darkened. His lips curled into a sneer. "You'll regret this, Jessica. You think you're winning, but you're not. You'll never be anything without us. And one day you'll realize that." Something inside me clicked into place. The last remaining sliver of hope I had that he could ever change, shattered. I met his gaze head on. "Then I guess we'll see, won't we?" Without another word, I shut the door in their faces. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. The moment I closed that door, I knew. I was done. Not just with their manipulation, not just with their entitlement. With them. I stood there for a long time, my hands gripping the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest. I had spent years trying to earn my father's respect. Years hoping that one day he'd look at me and see someone worth being proud of. But in that moment, as his threat still rang in my ears, I realized something that should have been obvious all along. No matter what I did, it would never be enough for them, and I didn't need it to be. The next morning, I sent the final notice. Subject: Notice to vacate. Property number 12 from JSC Holdings Legal Department. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Carter, as previously notified, the mortgage agreement for the property located at 2nd Street is no longer in effect due to non-payment. As of today, your tenancy is officially terminated. You are required to vacate the premises within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in formal eviction proceedings. Please ensure all personal belongings are removed before the deadline to avoid legal complications. Sincerely, Jessica Carter, owner, JSC Holdings. I stared at the email for a long time before hitting send. This was it. They were out of my life. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. My mother called me 27 times that day. I didn't answer. My father left a single voicemail. "You'll regret this. One day you'll come crawling back. And when you do, we won't be here." I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. Liam, my brother, tried one last desperate move. Liam: "Congrats, Jessica. You just ruined our family. I hope you're happy." I didn't reply. They had spent years making me feel like I was the problem, like I was never enough, like I should be grateful just to exist in their world. But now they were the ones without a home. And I was finally free. 30 days passed. I didn't go to the house, didn't check in, didn't ask if they needed help. I didn't need to. Mark handled everything. He confirmed that they moved out the day before the deadline, likely trying to save the embarrassment of being formally evicted. The house was left mostly intact, though they took what they could and left the rest in piles of garbage. Typical. I drove there one last time, just to see it. The house was quiet, empty. The home I had once cherished, the place where I had grown up, was now mine alone. But as I stood in the doorway, staring at the abandoned rooms, I felt nothing. No sadness, no guilt, no nostalgia. Just relief. I pulled out my phone and dialed Uncle Ray. "They're gone," I said simply. He exhaled. "How do you feel?" I thought about it for a second. Then I smiled. Lighter. I sold the house 2 weeks later. The market was strong, and within days, it was off my hands. The profits? I used them to start a fund for young women escaping financially abusive families. Women who, like me, had been made to believe they owed their families everything just for being born. Because I knew how it felt to be trapped. I knew how it felt to believe that love had to be earned. But I had learned something important through all of this. Real family isn't determined by blood. It's determined by who truly stands by you. And my real family? It wasn't them. It was me. 3 months later, a message popped up in my inbox. It was from my mother. "Mom. Jessica. Please, I don't know where else to go. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. A few months ago, I would have agonized over this. I would have questioned whether I was making the right decision, whether I was being too harsh, too cruel. But now, I simply deleted the message. Because some bridges deserve to be burned, and I wasn't looking back. Sometimes I wonder if my father ever really saw me as his daughter, or just an investment. A safety net he could cash in when things got tough. If I had known what would happen, would I still have helped him? Maybe. Maybe not. But I do know one thing. I'll never let someone use me like that again. Growing up, my father, Henry Callaway, was larger than life. A self-made businessman, the proud owner of Callaway and Sons Manufacturing, a company that had been in our family for 3 generations. It was his pride and joy. More than his wife. More than his children. More than me. I learned young that love in our family wasn't unconditional. My father believed in one thing. Results. You earn your place or you don't have one. My older brother, Damien, was the golden child, groomed to take over the company since birth. I was the backup plan, the one who had to be self-sufficient because business isn't a place for emotions. I remember being 10, sitting at the dinner table, listening to my father talk about how Damien was going to be the next great leader. I had piped up, eager to be included. "What about me, Dad?" He had chuckled, ruffling my hair absent-mindedly. "Sweetheart, you'll do just fine on your own. Women don't need to run companies. They marry into them." I had laughed along with everyone else, pretending the words didn't sting. By the time I was old enough to prove him wrong, I had no interest in Callaway and Sons. I built my own path, went to college on a scholarship, and carved out a career in financial consulting. And while my father barely acknowledged my success, Damien had it worse. He tried to live up to expectations, but the truth was he was reckless with money, and even worse with leadership. Callaway and Sons had been bleeding for years, but my father refused to see it, until it was too late. The call came on a cold December morning. "Daisy, we need to talk," my father said, his voice taut. No pleasantries, no, "How are you?" Just straight to business. "Come by the house, tonight." When I arrived, my father was already seated at the dining table, a folder full of documents spread in front of him. My mother sat silently beside him. Worry lines creased deep into her face. Damien was there too, swirling a glass of whiskey, his knee bouncing nervously. My father steepled his fingers, watching me. "The company is in trouble." I didn't say anything. I had suspected it for years. "I need your help," he continued. "You work in finance. You know how to fix things like this." I glanced at the papers, scanning the figures. Debt? declining revenue, mismanaged funds. It was worse than I expected. "How much do you need?" I asked, my voice even. He looked me in the eye. $2 million. I nearly laughed. $2 million? Dad, I don't have that kind of money. His jaw tightened. But you have connections, investors, ways to restructure debt. Ah, so that was it. He didn't just want help. He wanted me to pull strings, risk my reputation, put my own finances on the line for a company that had never been mine, for a father who had never truly supported me. I should have said no, walked away. But despite everything, some small part of me wanted to prove my worth, to show him I wasn't just fine on my own. I was indispensable. So I agreed. Over the next 6 months, I threw myself into fixing Callaway and Sons. I brought in financial experts, negotiated with creditors, and convinced investors to give them another chance. I poured my time, my expertise, my resources into salvaging a company I had no stake in. And slowly it worked. The company stabilized, and by the end of the year, it was no longer on the brink of collapse. Then, 2 weeks before Christmas, I received an email from my father's lawyer, a revised will. I stared at the words, my stomach sinking. My father had rewritten his will to leave everything, to Damien. Not a single mention of me. I read it again. Sure, I had misunderstood. After everything I had done, he had still chosen Damien. He had still chosen to see me as nothing more than an outsider. I confronted him that same evening. I stormed into his study, throwing the papers onto his desk. "Explain this." He barely looked up. "It's how it should be." I clenched my fists. "I saved your company, Dad. I put my name on the line. And you're telling me that doesn't matter?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Daisy, you'll be fine. You always are. But Damien, he needs this. He's the future of this company." I exhaled sharply, nodding to myself. "All right," I said. "Then let Damien figure it out from now on." And just like that, I walked out. I cut the money flow, severed ties, and for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to win his approval. A week later, my phone rang. I answered, expecting some sort of reconciliation. Instead, I was greeted with a sharp, impatient voice. "Where the hell is my money?" No hello, no thank you, no remorse. I smiled bitterly, gripping the phone tight. "No hello, I'm fine. Thanks for asking." Silence. Then he scoffed. "Don't be dramatic, Daisy. You have an obligation to this family." I felt something inside me snap. An obligation? After being treated like I was expendable my entire life? I took a deep breath. "No, Dad," I said calmly. "I don't." And then I hung up. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding in my chest. He was going to call back. He was going to send a message. He was going to realize what he had done and apologize. Any second now. The screen stayed dark. The silence stretched, filling the space around me like a heavy fog. For the first time in my life, my father needed something from me that I wasn't willing to give. And instead of apologizing, instead of trying to fix what he had broken, he had responded with entitlement. I had been a tool, not a daughter. And now that I refused to be used, he was furious. A slow, bitter laugh escaped my lips. I shouldn't have been surprised. And yet, some naive part of me had hoped that this time would be different. That night, I didn't sleep. Every few hours, I'd pick up my phone, half expecting another call. But my father was stubborn. If I wasn't going to cave immediately, he would wait. Let me stew in my own guilt before making his next move. I wasn't going to fall for it. The next morning, I walked into my office, my assistant immediately sensing something was off. "Everything okay, Daisy?" she asked hesitantly. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just dealing with some family stuff." She nodded, but I could see the concern in her eyes. I had always been the one with the answers. The fixer, the dependable one. But for the first time, I wasn't fixing anything. I was letting it burn, By the end of the week, the emails started. At first, they were civil. From Henry Calloway. Subject: let's be reasonable. Daisy, I understand you're upset. But family is family. We don't turn our backs on each other. Call me. I deleted it. 2 days later, another one. From Henry Calloway. Subject: this is bigger than you. You're being short-sighted. You built your career in finance. You, of all people, should know that Calloway and Sons is a long-term investment. You helped save it. Why throw that away? Damien is struggling to handle things on his own. Come fix this before it's too late. Damien is struggling. Of course he was. I had seen it coming years ago. And yet, my father still thought I was the problem. This time, I responded. From Daisy Calloway. Subject: this is bigger than you. It's not my responsibility to clean up Damien's messes. It never was. I hit send before I could overthink it. A week later, my father showed up at my office. I was in a meeting when my assistant hesitantly knocked on the conference room door. Miss Calloway, your father is here. Every head in the room turned toward me. I kept my expression blank. Tell him I'm busy. He says it's urgent. Of course he did. Everything was urgent when it was about what he needed. I sighed, standing up. Give me 5 minutes. As I stepped out into the waiting area, I saw him pacing by the windows. He looked different, less put together than usual. His suit was still pressed, but the tie was loosened, and his hair, always carefully styled, looked slightly disheveled. He turned when he heard my heels click against the marble floor. Daisy, he started, forcing a smile. Good to see you. I crossed my arms. Is it? He exhaled through his nose, clearly trying to maintain patience. I didn't come here to fight. No? I tilted my head. You storm into my office unannounced after I've ignored all your emails, but you don't want to fight? He clenched his jaw. I just want to talk. I sighed. Fine, talk. He hesitated, as if this conversation wasn't going the way he had rehearsed it. Then, finally, he got to the point. The company is still in trouble. The investors are getting antsy. Damien is overwhelmed. I arched a brow. And? He looked at me like I was speaking another language. And we need you back. We. As if I was still part of this. As if I hadn't been erased from the will, pushed aside the moment my usefulness had expired. I let out a breathy chuckle. No. His expression hardened. No? That's right. Number his lips pressed into a thin line. Daisy, this isn't just about you. If the company collapses, it won't just be us who suffer. There are employees, families who depend on Calloway and Sons for their livelihoods. Are you really going to be this selfish? There it was. The guilt trip. The same tactic he had used my entire life. The same manipulation I had fallen for time and time again. But this time, it didn't work. I met his gaze, my voice steady. I already saved it once. That was my contribution. I owe you nothing. His face darkened. That company was built for Damien. You knew that. You always knew that. And yet he had still come crawling to me when Damien had failed. I shook my head, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Then let Damien handle it. I turned on my heel, walking away. Daisy, I glanced over my shoulder. This conversation is over, Dad. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. I expected the next move to come quickly. My father never took no for an answer, and I had given it to him in the firmest way possible. But days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Silence. At first, I thought maybe he had finally understood. Maybe, for once, he had taken me at my word. I should have known better. Because when the next move came, it wasn't from him. It was from my mother. I was leaving work late, exhaustion pressing against my temples when my phone rang. Mom. I hesitated before answering. Unlike my father, she rarely called. She had always been the quiet observer, the neutral party, the woman who had let things happen rather than making them happen. I swiped to accept the call. Daisy, she said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. I sighed. Hi, Mom. Are you busy? I just left the office. There was a pause, like she was gathering courage. Can we talk? I leaned against my car, gripping the door handle. I already knew where this was going. Go ahead. She exhaled shakily, and for the first time in years, I thought she might actually be nervous. It's about your father, she said. And Damien. Of course it was. They're struggling, sweetheart. I know you and your father had words, but this isn't just about him. The company is hanging by a thread. Your brother is drowning. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Mom, Please, Daisy. Her voice cracked, and I froze. My mother had always been composed. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. If my father was the storm, she was the still water beneath it. And yet, I could hear the weight in her voice. The desperation. For a brief moment, guilt curled in my stomach. She continued before I could answer. Your father isn't doing well. He's not eating. He barely sleeps. She hesitated. I'm worried about him. I closed my eyes. Classic. My father hadn't called again because he had realized something. I was immune to him. But my mother? He knew I still saw something good in her. He knew I might bend for her, even when I wouldn't bend for him. And so, here she was, playing the part of the worried wife, the mediator, the one who could make things right if I just gave in. But this time, I saw through it. I swallowed back the guilt and steadied my voice. Mom, I love you, but I won't do this. She inhaled sharply. Daisy. No, I said, firmer now. This is the pattern, isn't it? He burns everything to the ground and you clean up the ashes. You beg, you smooth things over, and he gets away with it. Again and again. Silence. I pressed on. I refused to be part of it anymore. I saved that company once. I saved him once, and he repaid me by cutting me out like I never mattered. He made his choice. Her voice was barely a whisper. Daisy, it's not that simple. It is, I said. For once, it is. I climbed into my car, gripping the steering wheel. You want to save him, Mom? Then let Damien do it. That's who he chose. That's who he bet everything on. She exhaled slowly, and I knew she understood. But understanding wasn't the same as acceptance. I just don't want to lose my daughter over this, she said finally. A lump formed in my throat. You won't, I promised. But I won't lose myself over this either. I ended the call before she could say anything else. The next morning, I woke up to a headline. Callaway and Sons. Third-generation business at risk as family dispute unfolds. I blinked, rereading the words. What the hell? I sat up, scrolling through the article. Anonymous sources claimed that internal family conflict was jeopardizing the company's future. That a former family member had walked away at a critical time, leaving the company and its employees in turmoil. And though they never named me, it was obvious who they were talking about. I barely had time to process it before my phone exploded with messages. From an old college friend. Daisy, is this article about you? From a former client. Hope you're okay. Let me know if you need to get ahead of this. From my assistant. Do you want me to start screening calls? I was still staring at my phone when a text popped up from Damien. Damien. You should have just helped, Daisy. Rage flooded my veins. This wasn't just a news leak. This was a calculated attack. A public smear campaign to pressure me into bending. My father had played his last card. And that's when I knew. He had lost. Because I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't the little girl at the dinner table, desperate to be seen. I wasn't the fixer, the safety net, the silent daughter in the shadows. I was done. I typed out a single response to Damien. Me. Tell Dad that if he wants to drag me through the mud, he better be prepared for the consequences. I hit send. I expected the fallout from my text to be immediate. My father was the kind of man who couldn't stomach being challenged, let alone being threatened. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of his wrath. I was ready for it. The next morning, I sat in my office, sipping coffee as I scrolled through the latest financial reports for a client. A sense of eerie calm had settled over me. Then my assistant knocked. She looked hesitant, like she was debating whether or not to even speak. "Daisy, your mother is here." I stiffened. My mother never showed up unannounced. I set my coffee down and exhaled slowly. "Send her in." A moment later, she stepped inside, looking as though she hadn't slept in days. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she was clutching her purse like it was the only thing holding her together. "Mom," I said evenly, "this is a surprise." She didn't sit. Instead, she stood in front of my desk, wringing her hands. "Daisy," she started, then stopped. Her voice wavered. "Your father, he's furious." I almost laughed. "When is he not furious?" "This time is different," she insisted. "He's talking to lawyers. He wants to sue you." I blinked. "Sue me?" I repeated, incredulous. "For what? For not giving him my money? Is that illegal now?" She swallowed. "He thinks you misled the investors, that you sabotaged the company by walking away." I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. "Mom, I didn't sabotage anything. I saved that company. And when I left, everything was stable. The fact that it's collapsing now, that's on Damien. That's on Dad." "I know," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know that, sweetheart." "Then why are you here?" I didn't say it out loud. I already knew the answer. She wasn't here because she agreed with my father. She was here because she was scared of him. "I need you to make this right," she pleaded. "If he goes through with this, it could ruin you. Even if you win, the damage to your reputation—" I cut her off. "He already tried to ruin me," I said coldly, gesturing toward my phone, where the article about Calloway and Sons was still open. "He already dragged my name through the mud. And now that it didn't work, he wants to play legal games?" I leaned forward. "I won't be bullied, Mom. Not by him. Not by anyone." She sat down then, like her legs had finally given out. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. I sighed, rubbing my temples. My mother had always been passive, always standing in my father's shadow, making excuses, keeping the peace. I didn't want to be like her. I refused to be like her. "You have two choices, Mom," I said gently. "You can keep defending him. Keep throwing yourself between him and reality. Keep letting him walk all over you." I let that sink in before I continued. "Or you can walk away, like I did." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't know how." And that was the difference between us. I had figured it out. I had broken free. And she never would. "I love you, Mom," I said softly, "but I won't fix this for him." She looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Then she stood, wiped her tears, and without another word, walked out. The lawsuit never came. It was an empty threat, just like I suspected. But my father wasn't finished. A few days later, I got an alert from my bank. A fraud warning. Someone had tried to access my accounts. I immediately called my bank, my pulse spiking. "Miss Calloway, we flagged multiple attempts to access your accounts from an unfamiliar device," the representative explained. "We've locked everything down for now, but we recommend you check your security settings." I already knew who it was. My father. I should have been furious, but instead I just felt exhausted. He had no power over me, so he was grasping at anything he could find. I spent the next hour changing every password, setting up extra layers of security, and freezing all access to my financial records. And then, for good measure, I texted Damien. "Me. Tell Dad if he ever tries to touch my money again, I will press charges." It took him a full 30 minutes to respond. Damien. I didn't know he would do that. I scoffed. Liar. Me. You did. And you let him. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. Because Damien wasn't the mastermind. He was just a pawn, as he always had been. A week later, I got another call from my mother. But this time, she wasn't begging. She was panicking. Daisy, she gasped, her voice shaking. It's your father. He collapsed. For a moment, the world around me stilled. I gripped my phone. What? They rushed him to the hospital. His heart... Her voice broke. They're not sure if he's going to make it. I swallowed, my throat tight. I should have felt something. Pain, fear, regret. But all I felt was numb, because even now, even with this, I knew what she was really asking. Come home. Come back. Fix it. I exhaled. Keep me updated, I said. Let me know what the doctors say. She let out a shaky breath. Are you coming? I closed my eyes. No, Mom. The moment I hung up, I expected to feel something. Guilt, sadness, even relief. But there was nothing. Just silence. For years, my father had loomed over my life, a force too powerful to ignore. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, every late night spent fixing his mistakes, it had all been to prove myself to a man who never saw me as anything more than a tool. And now? Now he was lying in a hospital bed, and I couldn't bring myself to care the way I thought I should. I wasn't heartless. I was just empty. 3 days passed. 3 days of missed calls from my mother. 3 days of texts from numbers I didn't recognize. 3 days of Damien saying nothing at all. On the 4th day, my phone buzzed again. Mom. He's stable, but weak. The doctor said it was a warning sign. He needs to make major lifestyle changes. Maybe this will be the wake-up call he needs. I stared at the screen. A wake-up call? She still believed in that? That my father, the man who had been manipulating, scheming, and controlling people his entire life, would suddenly change just because his body had finally caught up with his karma? I didn't reply. The next message came later that evening. Mom, he's asking for you. I let out a breath, rubbing my temples. Of course he was. Not because he had changed, not because he was sorry, but because he needed something. I typed back the only answer I could give. No. I didn't expect a response. But after a long pause, the typing bubbles appeared. Mom, I understand. Just think about it, Daisy. I wouldn't. A week later, I saw the news. Callaway and Sons was collapsing. For real this time. The article painted a clear picture. An empire in free fall. Investors pulling out. Employees being let go. Debt piling up. Damien had failed. And my father was too weak to fix it. I expected Damien to call. To beg. To try one last time to pull me back in. But the only message I got from him was a short, bitter text. Damien, you got what you wanted. I stared at it for a long moment before typing back. Me. No, Damien. I got what I deserved. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. The morning after Damien's text, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not relief. Not victory. Just peace. For the first time, there were no fires to put out. No urgent calls, no manipulative pleas, no threats looming over me. Callaway and Sons was sinking, but it wasn't my problem. My father was recovering, but I didn't have to be part of it. Damien was dealing with the wreckage, but I felt no obligation to clean up after him. For once, my life was mine alone. 1 week later, my mother called again. I debated ignoring it, but I didn't. Mom, I answered, keeping my voice neutral. She hesitated. Your father is home. I said nothing. He's different, she added quickly. Quieter. He hasn't said much since he got back from the hospital. I still said nothing. I think he wants to see you, she said, voice uncertain. But he won't ask. I let out a slow breath. And you want to know if I will? Silence. Then, softly, she said, Would you? Would I? Would I walk back into that house, sit in front of the man who had erased me from his legacy, who had only seen me as an asset to be used and discarded? Would I give him one last chance? I closed my eyes. And then I made my final choice. No, Mom, I won't. A shaky breath on the other end. I thought you might say that. I swallowed. Are you going to stay? She didn't answer right away. Then, just above a whisper, she admitted, I don't know how to leave. I pressed my fingers to my temple. Then that's your choice to make, I told her, just like I made mine. I heard her inhale sharply, as if she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. She just whispered, I love you, Daisy. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. I love you too, Mom, I said. Then I hung up. And that was the last time I ever spoke to her. A month later, I stood outside my new home, a place with no history, no painful memories, no ghosts of a childhood spent begging for scraps of affection. It was small, but mine. As I sipped my coffee on the porch, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Whoever it was, my mother, my father, Damien, one of their enablers, they weren't part of my life anymore. I had cut the cord, and I would never go back. With a final glance at the phone, I hit block. And then, smiling to myself, I went back inside. I had won. Not the way they thought winning worked. Through money, power, control, but in the only way that truly mattered. I had my freedom. And nothing. Not my father's empire, not my family's expectations, not the weight of the past, could take that away from me ever again.